Hey everybody, Stepan Hovnanian for Google Plus Business Spotlight. Welcome back. It's a beautiful week. We're very excited to have our guest here. I wore a special black shirt for you today, David, because
I appreciate
I
this.
did push-ups this morning so that, I could see if I could compete. Um, so yeah, if you don't know our esteemed guest today, David Amerland, author of two amazing books and many, many more, but I've only read two of them at this point. But one on semantic search, one on Hangouts, two phenomenal books that will really help you understand the landscape and the changing landscape of online marketing, the web, Hangouts, the whole thing. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that today. Also some other really cool Google Plus related things, because that's what this show is. It's about how people use Google Plus. So before we kind of kick things off, obviously, you got to say hi to Ben. How are you today, buddy?
Happy Wednesday, everybody. And David, my brother.
Good to see you.
Actually,
good to see you, buddy.
Global representation, right? You're West. David, you're back in the UK now, right?
I've come to Greece and I'm flying back to the UK on Monday because I'm speaking at SMX London.
Jeez.
I came because I had to. I was going to stay there, but I had to do something in Greece. So then I'm just going to catch a flight out. But then I'll be flying back to Greece for the summer. This is good because the weather's unreal. It's 24 degrees centigrade today. Really sunny.
Oh, that's hot. So yeah, we've got most of the globe covered now, and now let's cover Twitter. So if you guys haven't, and you're doing a fantastic job with this, do us a favor. We have in the event page, and then anywhere else, if you're watching this on the replay, there's a link to tweet about the show. Use the hashtag GPLUSSPOTLIGHT because it's working. It's actually bringing people from outside Google Plus onto the platform, showing them a little bit about what this is, what this whole Hangouts thing is about, and teaching them about Google Plus. And I think that's a fantastic segue to David's book. Wouldn't you agree?
Wait a minute,
totally.
David writes books?
He does.
In my spare time, yeah.
I didn't know that about you, David. Man, we've been talking forever. Really? Go on about that. What kind of books do you have?
With words. Text. Not picture books.
I just figured that out. Moving a little slow.
So, David, I mean, really, seriously, okay, so you just got done with Ronnie, and you just launched the Hangout book. Yeah. Ironically, of course, we're on a Hangout now. So, let's get this out of the way, man. Hangouts on air. Your previous book, Semantic Search. Of course, one of the most widely read and authoritative books about, well, the only book about Google semantic search. How do Hangouts tie into semantic search, especially with, natural language search, Hummingbird? Is Google listening to us?
Yeah, pretty much. I'm glad you asked that question. There are two touch points, and really the book on Hangouts was a natural progression from Google semantic search to Google Plus Hangouts for Business. And the reason it was a natural progression is because essentially a lot of the things that we do in a Hangout are about relationship building and the engagement factor, the way it's reshared, who interacts, who engages, who comments, become part of the Google Plus signal that Google sees. But also, if we think about it, the voice recognition technology that powers voice search is also actively employed in Hangouts and YouTube videos, and it's increasingly informing Google search. And also, if you look at a Google Hangout or Google video and YouTube, it is automatically transcribed from voice into text, imperfectly sometimes with some very comical results. But it does happen, and it's getting better all the time. So essentially, we're getting the video signal or the video connection, which is formed amongst us as individuals, which then goes on to affect our profiles and the connectivity amongst different authoritative figures on G+, which then informs essentially the way we connect in search. And all this is mined, so it comes up in semantic search.
Wow. So what you're saying basically is interacting with people, which is what we're doing right now, tells Google what we're all about and helps them figure out kind of what buckets to put us in when it comes time to rank some of our content. And that this goes for business pages just as well as it does for profiles.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it allows. I mean, we talk about three things in a semantic web. We talk about trust, we talk about authority, and we talk about reputation. And these are essentially human qualities or human attributes, which now we expect to see in search. Funnily enough, which is programming, and that's how it happens. You know, it looks at the interactions and it ascribes a certain value in terms of the connection and how the connection happens, when does it happen, what's the context of that connection, and then how frequently it is repeated and in what context again. And out of all that, collectively, we get a pretty strong signal about who is who and what they do and how it interacts and affects everybody else around them, and vice versa. And that is the most transparent way that we can actually see how the web works and how search, now semantic search, is beginning to affect essentially how content is surfaced.
Amazing. You know, one thing I'd have to ask about the question about that is this, David, and your thoughts is, so we know that Google can, in a sense, read what we're verbally saying, right? At least to some degree today.
Yes. Yes.
But let's look 2 years down the road. And that is that, do you think that the capability of actually discerning sentiment about what we're saying, how we're saying it, and to who we're saying it within a Hangout is possible?
Oh, definitely. I mean, not too long ago, about 6 months ago, Google gave a number of grants to universities to actually look into sentiment mining technology with a view of creating a sentiment graph. And that is the clearest indication that, you know, things are heading that way. It's going to become incredibly nuanced. Is it difficult? Hugely so. I mean, if we think that, you know, as people, sometimes we don't get jokes or sarcasm said amongst relatively known people on the web. So to actually expect a machine to do it is a lot more difficult. But certainly, it's a challenge that Google is tackling, and we should expect to see an effect before too long.
Wow. Okay, so to lighten the gravity of that up a little bit, do you A, think there is going to be a sarcasm tag in HTML5? And B, do you think Google will start to recognize air quotes in video to apply same sarcastic comments to their ranking, to their sentiment analysis?
Well, actually, both of these have a serious answer. Now, if you think things are becoming nuanced, you know, eventually we might indeed need a sarcasm tag, because then it will make sense to have it. Right now, it's just a joke we all use. But, you know, as things become more and more refined, certainly there's perhaps a possibility that we'll have something like this develop. And in terms of air quotes, if you think that Google not too recently ago learned to recognize cats on video on its own using just 13,000 processors interlinked with just 2 commands to guide them. And they recognize cats so by watching active live YouTube videos. Certainly at some point, the air quotes, which we do, will become one of those things like a tag. So the moment you air quote something, it will know that it actually means something because it's a universal gesture used in a very specific context. So possibly, yes, it will actually come to mean something. At the moment, of course, it's just a joke, right? Because we you know, they can't. But yeah, the potential is there.
Awesome. You heard it first right here, everybody, at Google Plus Business Spotlight. Got air quotes and sarcasm tags.
Yeah,
exactly. I've already put it in the stream. Sarcasm tag, Stefan Hooknanian. Okay. So and now we see all the black hat SEOs. Now they start going, okay, so we got to go ahead and make sure that we stuff it with sarcasm tags.
I like that.
So true. Sarcasm font. Yeah, Cheryl Deuce has a great. We want a sarcasm font like italics.
Yes.
Yeah, we need that. We could use that in Google Plus markup too, guys. If you're listening, we could definitely use sarcasm markup because it's kind of a pain in the neck to do it right now. You know what?
It is.
It really is. It's like, you know, italics, then the brackets, sarcasm, unbracket, forget it. Come on, give me something else, guys. You know.
There's actually this really quick side note. There's this thread that we've got going actually with Bex and the guy who's in charge of the mobile development team. They're working on a quote-unquote marquee tag for mobile. Not saying they're working on it, but he's showing us a prototype. So, all right, I'm gonna ask if we can make a sarcasm tag. Anyway, side note complete.
But you know what? It's another great segue, and we're not doing this on purpose, but this is just happening naturally, semantically. Talk about markup and Google Plus posts, and how they can get a little cumbersome. Let's talk about your Sunday read, because, dude, if anybody watching this, if you have not seen or read one of David's Sunday reads, they come out on fill in the blank Sunday, and they're just a fantastic compilation around a single topic, and it's not like SEO or websites or online marketing or anything. It's like creativity and empathy and just totally amazing thought concepts, right? And David pulls together a whole bunch of articles and conversations from around Google Plus that have been happening, and he pulls them into one spot for all of us to just pull up some coffee and sweets, as he says, and just enjoy them. So I would love to learn a little bit more about your curation process, because you put at least 10 to 12 posts in there, and it's it's a lot of work, and also why. What's the point behind it? I don't mean it critically. It would be great for people to understand. Why would somebody go through the process of doing something like this? Because strategically, it makes a ton of sense to curate things from around the web. You bring a lot of people together, but how do these topics especially play into your business?
Yeah. Well, okay. This is going to have a complex answer, because essentially a lot of the things I come across on a day-to-day basis when I talk to corporations, or when I do research, or when I see posts, or when I just do research for my own purposes. I also, when you do all these things, you always find rabbit holes to go down on, and you find out new things, and which are amazing, and they spark off your own thinking processes. And when that happens, I don't usually have a lot of leeway to follow them, because I'm working. I'm doing things which really, need my attention. I need to write reports. I need to do analysis in terms of search and social web for corporate clients. So these things stay in the back burner, but I don't lose track of them. I keep track of everyone. And what happens is, the moment you have that, in a very semantic way, the moment you have a whole lot of things, suddenly they begin to form into categories. And the touch points of those categories are very human, are the things we're thinking about. Now, although we're working, we're marketing, and we're thinking about how to get business and make money, because this is how we make a living. At the same time, we're also thinking about the world we live in, the world that our activities inform and change and begin to affect. And there's no easy way to do this on a sort of ordinary working day, because we're all working to some extent. So they come together, and they come together fairly organically. Collect all these items and conversations and points and research, and suddenly they crop up, and a lot of the times they resonate with things which come up in conversations. At the moment we're really trying to analyze and understand authenticity, and we know what it is, but the question is, okay, if we don't know what it is, how do we create it? And once we have created it, how do we know if it's fake or is it real? And this is like heat, right? We all know what it is, but if you come to actually explain it in terms of physics, because it's a fundamental property, it becomes really complicated. And that's the same with authenticity. It's a fundamental human attribute. Trust is another one. Reputation and how that's built, that's another one. Empathy. These are all things which allow us to create connections which actually mean something. Mean something not just in terms of business, but actually the way we connect as people. And we find ourselves now in a world where we say we have a relationship economy, or relationship building connections, run by the attention economy. And the attention economy really is what it is, because technology may get better and better and allows us to do more and more things, but there's only 24 hours to the day, and that's ever likely to be 24 hours to the day. So that's the limiting factor. In order to do anything, to give somebody a piece of information, to exchange something with them in a meaningful way on the web, to get them to pay attention to what you do as a business, you really need to grasp their attention and hold it. And that's when the engagement really begins to happen, and that's when you win their custom if it comes to business, or their referral if they bring you a friend. For that to happen, you need to connect with them as a person first. So yeah, I'm talking about steady demand. I know what they do, but really, there are 1,000 other firms doing the same thing. And the reason steady demand comes to my mind is because I know and have connected on countless occasions with Ben. And I know what he's like. I know that he's got a quirky sense of humor. I know that he's a person who has incredible views about many things. And that's what makes steady demand rise to my mind. Not their marketing, but a person, a face. And we're hardwired to do this very easily. Which brings us back down to how I put the Sunday reads together. Well, they are the human side of what we do. And if we look at all our activity on the web, a lot of the things which happen impact directly upon our humanity. And we don't frequently get a chance to see it because we work in very fragmented ways. We work in a very pressured environment. So the Sunday reads, which started as a kind of hobby, really, it's become a bit of a tradition and put it out every Sunday, is my, say, contribution to the conversation at a very human level, things which I find fascinating. I think the way we're developing, the way we are grasping at the challenges which come our way is really fascinating, and at the same time it really needs to be looked at by as many people as possible. And that content makes it possible.
Wow. First of all, thank you for all the compliments there, David. I appreciate it, brother. And that was truly awesome. And you know, I mean, I love the piece on empathy. I mean, that was just, it goes back to some of the things that in our marathon hangouts that we have that we've talked about many times, which is the humanization of marketing and just really the shifting consciousness in general that's happened. But one thing I was looking for, though, and not to say that the answer that you gave wasn't awesome, because as usual it is, right? But from a mechanical standpoint, if, let's say, I want to start up a Sunday read, sarcasm quotes, you know, for another day of the week, right? And I want it to be on a topic that has nothing to do with Google Plus or just internet marketing. It's just something, a passion of mine. How would I go about doing it in a time-efficient manner like you do? Because I know that sometimes you do this stuff while you're driving, literally. You know, you'll jot down a note, be like, oh, that is great, I just got out of this meeting. But how do you do it? Because you do it very efficiently.
Yeah, I had to work out a method. And what I do, which works for me, essentially, I keep track of everything which will go into a Sunday read at some point in Google Keep, because I can do that online and offline, and then it syncs, and it's always available no matter which device I'm on. You know, I can be on my desktop, it's always there. And what I do is I basically curate the content and I tag it. I'll tag it perhaps empathy or you know, whatever subject I think is necessary to be tagged under, or even a question mark if I'm not sure about. I may put 2 or 3. Then when I finish, because I put other stuff in Google Keep, I just do a search through Google Keep for that tag, and all the content comes up. And then looking at the content, you suddenly begin to see a story developing, and that's again the connection where when you actually see what you've curated over perhaps 3 weeks, then that becomes a story in its own right, and you can say, oh, there's a narrative. So pretty much the content dictates its own narrative form, and that makes it easier to put together, because I don't have to sit down for hours and think, how am I going to start and how am I going to link it, because it's already done. I just need to put it together. And most of the time it's, you know, what am I going to include, what am I going to leave out, so that it becomes more focused than rather than less. And that's usually the most critical choice I have. And what normally would take a couple of hours to put together gets pieced together in about 45 minutes, 40 minutes.
And you brought up an interesting point. So it isn't like this week's, we see it on a Sunday, and actually until now I never really thought of it this way, but some of the things you're linking to could have been from a month ago.
Yeah. It's just, you know, it's just things happening. They percolate through the surface, which is why it always feels so topical. It feels like, oh, it's to the moment. Well, it's to the moment because that's what we're talking about. But, you know, if we're talking about it now, we're just talking about it now more. We've always been talking about it. And, you know, I mean, if you think about the comments that have surfaced in threads over the last 2 years, we talk about trust and authenticity and reputation in comments in threads, which were about business. And we didn't really go into a lot of detail. And what we really needed to do is say, hey, can we start a comment thread on trust and actually talk about it? But we don't have the luxury of time to do that. And the Sunday Read becomes a perfect platform for that because it allows us to focus on the weekend when we're more relaxed and we're drinking coffee and having donuts. It allows us to do that.
Yeah, I mean that's actually, you know, that's brilliant, and I think that's a really good tip for almost any business out there. And that is, you could use Google Read, you could use Evernote, use whatever your best clipping mechanism is, tag it, and then when you're ready, go back, because now you've got this plethora of things that you've curated that you're interested in, and all you have to do is tie them together now at that point.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's, key takeaway right there, everybody. Make yourself some kind of a daily, a weekly, a monthly read, because now you know how to do it. Thank you, David, for that, actually.
More than welcome.
And if you really think you're up to it, take on Catterday.
That's probably the hardest day of the week to take on, right? Because we're talking about
knock this one out of the park. Make it a Saturday thing. Go for it. I'll read it. I'm not the biggest fan of Catterday, but you know, sometimes it ties in nicely. Or tie Catterday into whatever you're talking about, right?
There you go. Exactly. Well, Stone Temple does that greatly, actually. On
they do. Yeah. They do a beautiful job.
Stone Temple Cats, exactly. Yeah, which again shows, you know, a lot of the things which we do. I mean, the attention which we seek to get hold of will only work if what we're doing, first of all, has value. And secondly, if it resonates at a human level. And you know, if we think about Stone Temple Consulting, you know, they bring out their Stone Temple Cats curation every Saturday. And you know, they've got Stone Temple Cats, which is a bit of a joke. And you know, they usually have a cat meme to go with it. And you know, we all feel very easy connecting with that because it's part of the shared framework of acceptable jokes, which lowers then the resistance barrier, and we read the content and it makes sense. And again, that in order for that to happen, it humanizes what essentially is a brand, right? Giving us content, if you think about it. But that's exactly the kind of humanization that we're looking for when we say brands should be like people. Well, you know, you need to understand that people don't want to read a cut and dried marketing message which sounds like advertising. Give us something to play with.
You know, while we're at it, we might as well give another shout out to somebody who does a really fantastic job on a different day of the week. Mick Sharp with his Friday favorites with you. Usually recapping most of the time it's Hangouts, but he does a fantastic job and talk about a brand, same concept, right? He's come out with a beautiful graphic. And just like your Sunday Read and the Stone Temple Cats one, you know, it's a very branded graphic. You know exactly, and you know when it's coming too. And I think that kind of consistency is really important. This is almost like, you know, email newsletters. I mean, that style of marketing, things like the consistency and the value and the branding are all really important to email newsletters. And so we're just doing this on social. So it's fantastic.
And Stepan, that's a very important point to make, because you said consistency in terms of timing when the post comes out. And if you're talking about branding and using the G+ environment as a brand to actually get somewhere, being part of somebody's structured event horizon in Google+ is brilliant, because it allows them to create a certain amount of comfortable use of the environment, which is constantly changing, and then it becomes part of their landscape. So the Friday Read, you know, I usually reshare saying, you know, it's Friday because this has come out. Because every day of the week feels the same almost. You know, we work on 7-day weeks, most of us, and we work across time zones and, you know, different countries. In my case, I was last month. Each country I woke up in a different. Each week I woke up in a different country. And you know, having the ability to say what remained the same for me every week was Google+. You know, the Friday Read came out on time. I put out my Sunday Read on Sunday. You know, posts came up, and that's brilliant. And that's, again, you know, being able to find an audience and become part of their landscape. It's part of capturing their attention. And if you have that, then, you know, you've got something which is really worth something.
Yeah, I totally agree. You know, one question I'd love to ask you, David, is this. I mean, unfortunately there's no good segue into this question, so I'm just going to move on into it. You know, it's hashtag sorry, no segue. And that is you know, you've done a lot on Google+, right? You're on the suggested user list. You put out the books. We've already talked about the Sunday Read, and there's so much more that you do on Google+, of course. You know, but if you had to kind of go back, is there anything that you really wish that you could have done differently?
Yeah. Well, well, what it is I would really ideally like to be able to spend more time on Google Plus, and I can't. And the reason I say this is because frequently I engage in a thread, and you know, it's part of my conscious decision to always engage when I'm tagged in or when it's a thread where I'm mentioned, and I do, and a conversation starts, and I know that the moment the conversation starts and gets really involved, I'm going to move on, and I won't really have a lot of time to go back and get involved in it, even though they'll probably tag me again. But then I'm going to have another 200 posts to actually go through, and it's not going to happen. And I'm sure that I'll lose a lot of the continuity and the value that comes from that. And that's a real regret for me, because the conversation, really the value of G+ for us is the depth of the conversation that we can get into, and a lot of the insights that are released through the conversation and interaction. And at the moment, because I'm so busy, and inevitably because I get tagged in so many posts, I tend to skim the surface a little bit, and I miss out on a huge chunk, and that is regrettable. I haven't got an easy solution for that one.
So now, all right, let me ask you this then. What's the motivation? You know, how do you keep yourself? How do you even select? I mean, you know what? I'm not going to ask you that, how you select, because that really might not be a very fair question. But how do you keep the motivation to keep going? And I know you like it, you know, coming to Google Plus. I know you like the continuity, but you are incredibly time strapped. You're all over the place. I mean, you know, how does this turn into ROI? Everybody asks this question. It's like, you know, it's
you're right. And
whatever. I mean, how does this pay off for you in the long run?
Yeah, you're right. Because ultimately, if we don't answer that question, then our presence here is going to be ephemeral. We're going to be here and go. So really, there must be a clear value that you get from it. And in my case, it's knowledge and challenges in my thinking, which are incredible. Before I came to Google+, I used to work in a very compartmentalized, largely siloed world. Everything I did was covered by a label. You know, I was strategist, consultant, writer, author, speaker. People accepted that label, and that's it. And that label became both part of my credentials and also a barrier, which people couldn't really penetrate very easily. And what happened behind that label is that I used to get very compartmentalized in my thinking, and I had to work really hard to get just very small gains. Coming to Google+, first of all, labels don't matter. Anybody can challenge you at any time, because if you say something stupid, they're going to call you out on it, which means your thinking has to be a lot deeper. Then the conversation releases so many insights. You get to see, you know, you put something out there, you have examined it through your own eyes, and then you get 20, 30 people interacting with it, and suddenly you have access to 20, 30 brains. Your brain power just goes up. You feel super smart. You know, all your thinking just expands really quickly. And that is the real value for me. And certainly my way of writing and the way I approach my books has changed since Google+ came along. Google Semantic Search, case in point. The book is very accessible because I shared a lot of the material in Google+ as I was writing it, and I had access to people's thoughts about it, the way it was perceived, suggestions. All those things found their way back into my writing, and it made a better book for it. So basically, it allowed me to change my personal writing style, which is incredible. And I'm not going back to writing the way I did before. So that's a gain I get from it. And because I get a kind of gain, it's become my world. You know, for the last month I was traveling. I was in different countries every week. You had to remember which country you were in and what language you're speaking, and you know which hotel you were in. But the moment I opened up any device, Google+ was still the same. It gave me a sense of continuity and an anchor point, which then allowed me to overcome a lot of the local differences. You know, time zones didn't matter very much. You know, cultural differences didn't matter because I could focus on what I always did. So that's part of your identity and your identity building mechanism, and that again for me is a gain, and that's why I engage so much.
That's awesome. Fantastic answer. But more importantly, it's a big takeaway, right? Because you can, and this is something I tell people too, like get out and comment, get out and put yourself out there into a popular thread where you can make a difference and maybe challenge some thoughts, or just at the bare minimum learn, ask a question and learn from 20 to 30 other people, like you said. I mean, that's, you know, we don't have to operate in a silo where we're doing all of the work ourselves. We can go out there and take advantage of the community and have have that benefit. I mean, it's because it's an open network, because of all the features and the tools that we have accessible to us. This really does become so. It mimics really real life and real life networking and collaboration so well. I mean, I can completely understand what you're saying because it makes perfect sense. It's very natural.
Yeah, exactly. And the real common thread, I think, that throughout this entire Hangout really has been is almost, in a sense, becoming a better writer. You can do it through curation and through the curation of greater minds, and so kind of almost like a hive mind in a sense. Whether it might be driving down the road and putting something into Google Keep as you have an idea, whether it might be hopping into a thread, having a conversation with 15 different people, that all becomes more content. Just curation in general. So, and then you can take all of that, you can semantically put it together. Hangouts. You're in a Hangout. There's a lot of things happening in Hangout that never get written about. You can get those, save some of those pieces and make something. So if you don't have time for content marketing, like this guy, start taking David's tips and start making something. And I know, and I'm going to say this publicly on air right now, I know I am. So thank you, David.
You're welcome.
Recorded to YouTube today.
I love what you said because it's really funny. I was thinking Hemingway said, when he was asked, how do you write? It's so complicated, it's a huge task. And he said, well, you begin with one true sentence, the truest sentence you can begin with. And I think what you just suggested, you work through curation, you write down your thoughts on Keep, you share them on Google+. The process for doing that in order to resonate with your audience is the easiest way I know of boiling off all the excess fluff. You end up with true sentences because you begin to become very real. You touch very human needs, and the touch points become very real in themselves. So yes, then writing becomes absolutely brilliant and a great way to actually develop your writing style and find your voice.
Fantastic.
I got a fun question. Okay, how many languages do you speak, David?
Well, I would like to say 3 because Australian, UK English, and US English.
Marilyn Moore asked the same question. How many languages do you speak? Okay, so
thank you, Marilyn.
Yeah, no, I'm learning Greek, so I speak some Greek imperfectly. It's a hugely difficult language. I speak some Russian because I spent almost a year living in Russia, and that's also another fiendishly difficult language. And that's it, really.
Okay, so I have a question. I don't know if you can do this, and if you can't, I'm sorry for asking the question. But can you say, I love Google Plus in every language that you know in a row?
Okay, I can do it in Greek, which is Sagapo, Google Plus, and in Russia, which is Ya Tibia Lublu Google Plus.
And then, of course, you've got English.
The English.
Naturally.
Awesome. You don't even spell love differently in UK English, so all right.
Yeah, it's true.
All right, guys. Well, I think we've hit our mark. We've covered so much stuff. So everybody, watch out for the blog post too, because I'm going to recap all of this. And I think there's a lot to learn here from today's conversation with David. And I want to thank everybody for coming. Actually, before we wrap up, David, anything big news or special or anything like that you want to give us a shout out to, or?
Well, yeah. Well, wearable devices are coming in more and more now. Just recently, Microsoft took out a patent for a wearable watch, which is going to be part of their wearable device strategy. And essentially, everything we do on Google+, which is connectivity and personal data and a personal data cloud, is going to become a lot more mobile. Google Glass is going to come along, which brings it back down to connections and relationships, because the connectivity we establish and the relationships we form become part of our personal and business survival strategy. They are our first line of defense in terms of finding credible content, sometimes testing ideas, and getting to see what is real in a world that's going to be found to find itself with more and more information. So we should just be doing more of the same in terms of matters rather than just pure marketing.
That sounds great. Sounds like a great plan. So with that, Thank you again, everybody, for coming. Thank you to David and Ben, obviously, for some amazing discussion. I hope all of you learned something. We're going to have, like I said, a recap to go check out. If you want to be invited to future events, to part of our invite circle on Google+, we have a dedicated page, whole dedicated channel for Google+ Business Spotlight. So let us know. We can add you to the event or future, invites. Over on GPLUSSPOTLIGHT.com, we got all kinds of great information, and on our email list, we love to send out special information, special tips, and insights about our guests, both present and future, to our subscribers. So until next week, we will see you guys around Google+, right?
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks again.
Take care.
Everybody. Thanks, David.
Bye-bye.